Wait, did you want me to do the intro?
You can do if you want.
Oh, this is the game again where we don't crud. All right, well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Osint Bunker podcast. We of course have John, Kyle, and our guest this week is Aleph. So I think we're just going to jump into, I guess, Ukraine, 1 year anniversary of Afghanistan, or the fall of the Afghan government / rise of the Taliban government is this week, and we also, of course, want to touch on some other Middle East stuff while we have Aleph in the room. So I think we're just going to launch into Ukraine here. I know, John, you wanted to talk about some stuff.
Do you want? We probably should have get out exactly where we were going to start. And did we want to start with the recent? Well, I wasn't here last time, was I? Did you talk much about the recent round between Islamic Jihad and Israel, or was that in between our episodes?
I edit the episode and I don't even remember what we talked about. So
been in between, to be fair, because I think we recorded it and then release was so much later that we might not have actually included it. We could start with that, I suppose.
As we got, we have Aleph here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, when you look at the situation, it's sort of not diffused itself, but resolved without further escalation.
Yeah, I was quite surprised by that. Normally there's a few attempts at a ceasefire, right, before one actually sticks. But it seems like, it was one and done this time, which is, good for everyone.
Oh, certainly. Well, I mean, this was the largest sort of sustained rocket barrage on Israel since the events of I think May of last year. And these two sort of May of last year and this one sort of are the largest in a while.
And the previous November, I think 2019.
Oh yeah, that one as well. I keep forgetting about that one.
Jihad's guy, Baha Abu Atta was killed as well. It was November 2019. Almost same thing happened, but I think there was a much difference this time because the Iron Dome interceptions got pretty much better. Like the interception rate, as they announced, was about 95-96% success rate. So basically, this round was very much impressive. I'm talking about the Iron Dome, the casualties or something like that.
I mean, we also saw a bit less of the more heavyweight rockets that were seen in May of last year.
Yeah, they were using the Qassam, I think it was 180, something like that.
Yeah, the basically the repurposed grads in ineffective terms.
But this time actually, I don't think what deterred them from targeting Tel Aviv. It was actually they didn't go that far the way last time they did. Maybe because of the rank of Abu Atta. I'm not comparing the last May. I'm talking about the November. Because that time they targeted Tel Aviv. They targeted areas in the central. But this time they were basically limited to southern parts. So, but I don't know. Maybe they did because got triggered once or twice in central too, but there was no impact. There was no nothing serious in the central part.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like Hamas not getting involved definitely contributed to that. Just because they seem to have sort of control over some of the longer range or more capable rocket systems than PIJ. And I mean, Hamas took a fair amount of damage last year, and that did seem to really affect their capabilities to actually project out and do what they did last May. And the damage done to the PIJ command structure this time around was fairly severe. Which is, we'll see what that does in the future. Obviously, it will
Yeah.
it'll restrict their abilities.
Yeah, but actually, the Peach, the Jihad movement also has long-range rockets, as far as I know, like Badr 3, the Borak series, some of which have longer range over about 50, 60, 70. They also have Fajr 5 and Fajr 3 that they're also in use in several areas of the Middle East, including the Yemen, including Iraq. So I don't think the problem was the arsenal of the Jihad Islamic movement, but the thing that Hamas didn't, intervene in this thing is very much interesting. There were talks on Israeli TV channels. Some say it might be it just tried to move itself to the corners and just keep its infrastructures. I'm sorry, I just woke up from the sleep. Keep its infrastructures and the Qatari money intact. On the other hand, some say that this was also planned by Hamas in order to just, undermine the Jihad Islamic movement's power. While it's not getting involved at anything, Jihad Islamic is using and also decreasing the number of its rockets and arsenal, getting its personnel and high rankings killed, while Hamas is just watching and maybe laughing.
Yeah, well, granted, the damage that Hamas, as I said, took a year ago. I mean, they went through this first. I mean, I do you think at this point that sort of the area, or at least in the strip, is sort of running out of those high-ranking, long-term commanders?
For which one? Hamas or Harikat for the Teach? Which one?
Both. Yeah, everyone.
All of them.
Yeah, I don't think that would be the I'm talking about the previous the recent, actually the latest one. I don't think it was that much of a damage to Islamic Jihad, because well, they have lots of operatives. Of course, it's very, very, very fewer than Hamas, but still. And I think this round was for suppressing Islamic Jihad, because they are more in control of Iran directly in comparison to Hamas, which is getting orders and getting maybe not direct orders, maybe getting the financial support through Qatar, Iran, and also Turkey, quote unquote, because many say that. But I think Peach is very, very much more of a pet project of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So maybe suppressing the wildest and the most uncontrollable proxy in Gaza would be a precaution thing for Israel for further operations in the West Bank, and maybe in southern Lebanon or southern Syria, including Quneitra. And after that, maybe they want to go for something longer than that, as they keep repeating that by themselves, that we are ready to engage with Iran if they are going to get close to obtaining a nuclear weapon. So I think suppressing the wildest one and the most uncontrollable one is a good option for Israel.
Yeah, and I think probably we should connect it back, because we would be remiss if we didn't. But I know the IDF announced today that their strike was responsible for the death of 5 children. And the IDF Twitter account had actually tweeted about that and was there is definitely a question to be had about the Israeli social media presence and sort of their level of responsibility or level of I don't really know the best term for this, but sort of a state level care or that level of responsibility basically to not put out or inflame a situation. And after they come out with this announcement that they were the ones responsible for the deaths, it kind of makes them look bad. And then the tweet is still up. I'll link it. But that seems to cause some increased tensions.
Yeah, it did, and it does. But the thing is, most of the times during these escalations, there are civilian casualties. Many of times there are relatives of the maybe operatives or fighters or jihadi people who are being targeted by Israel. So, of course, there are civilian casualties. No one is happy about it. Well, during the last one, as there were footage of Islamic Jihad's misfire, which landed inside Gaza and killed, some say up to 14, some say 8. There are different numbers because the Ministry of Health in Gaza is under control of Hamas. So, and of course, even though that they are basically rivals inside the Gazan soil, but still they don't want to damage the reputation of what they call Muqawima, or the resistance. So we have no idea how many were killed by the misfire, but there were screenshots from, I think the guy's name was Ahmad Najjar, a reporter or a so-called journalist from Gaza, who said there are casualties because of the misfire of a resistance faction,
which is basically...
Well, there was a misfire the previous day that I believe had killed 7 civilians, including 4 children.
I'm not sure.
That I know was a misfire.
Yeah. On the 8th of August, the Associated Press found
I think
evidence
Israel
of 2
needs a better
soldiers.
PR when it comes to the conflicts. Most of the times, Israel lacks that thing, and the gag orders, lots of things that they restrict. Some news, some confirmation. It actually backfires at Israel, and usually it gets worse because the WhatsApp groups are in Israel are always active, and obviously there are foreigners, including Gazans, including Palestinians, who are reading those messages and usually use those messages against it. So basically, IDF can't prevent the news from being published. But by making the gag order, it just gets worse and worse. So I believe that you're right. I think that Israel needs a better PR, even better footage collection, having better cameras.
Well, I think there's that.
Yeah.
Go on.
I think there's
Sorry.
that level of responsibility, as I said before. I mean, the international press exists, and Israel can't exactly put a gag order on them. So it all comes down to that, basically.
Yeah,
I'm what you were saying, John. Sorry, just to go back to what you were saying earlier. Yeah, so a day before, there was a rocket misfire which killed 4 children in the same area, and then that was on August 6th, and on the 7th there was the Israeli strike in the same region which killed another 4 children, which is awful. But you can see where the confusion comes from.
And
I think the issue is with the conflict between Israel and like factions in Gaza is especially on social media, there's a lot of misinformation immediately after things like this. I saw, when I got first made aware that, that the IDF have, investigated and taken responsibility for the strike earlier, was, people were screenshotting tweets from quite prominent, like Israeli celebrities and social media accounts, basically saying, oh, if you say it was Israel's fault, then it's anti-Semitic, it's this, it's that. The next thing, it was absolutely a rocket thing. And then a couple of weeks later, the IDF come out and do take responsibility, which, as you guys know, I'm never one to shy away from criticizing Israel when they do, they do fuck up and they do, deserve it. But one thing I will say is, Israel, it can be almost not commended as such, but at least when they do make these mistakes and these horrific mistakes, by and largely they do own up to it and they do take responsibility, unlike, for argument's sake, Russia, unlike other countries like Syria and other countries, which commit crimes and then deny. It is at least refreshing to see that they do take responsibility. Not that it changes what happened or fixes it, but yeah, it's definitely positive, and I think it's something that hopefully we see more of in future. Hopefully we don't see the mistakes made in the first place.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah,
they do, it's
I mean,
always
I
good
think
to
the
see
problem.
responsibility being taken.
I think the problem here was that they initially put out a tweet. The IDF put out a tweet basically claiming that it wasn't their fault,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
again is why I sort of question the social media presence sometimes as irresponsible.
Yes.
Yeah, I think jumping into conclusion by the IDF page on Instagram and Twitter that fast wasn't really wise enough, and actually, as I said, it backfires towards Israel. So, yeah, I agree with the taking the responsibility when there are civilian casualties, which I believe it's still and it will be inevitable because the people are living in a very tight area. Lots of these operatives are living in their houses, so when they target the house, even though that the building is intact, the unit that they're targeting, the apartment that they're targeting, well, there are people living. The guy is a terrorist according to Israel, and yeah, the guy is a terrorist, but he's living with his family, so there are civilian casualties. And even if there is, they can say that okay, 3 people were killed, amongst them that person, that operatives were there too. So Israel usually doesn't say that, and well, what we saw is happening and will happen for sure, as long as Israel doesn't clarify what it was targeting and clarifies the casualties.
And it's worth saying that obviously there was somewhere in the region of 1,100 rockets fired from Gaza over the course of the 4 or 5 days that this was going on for, and considering that even the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East turned around and said something like 20% of those didn't even make it across the border into Israel and so fell into Gaza and caused casualties there.
Mm-hmm.
The casualty numbers, in all honesty, are fairly low, like surprisingly low. I mean, we are talking, I think it was, someone was quoted as saying something in the region of about 50 people total killed in Gaza, of which 36 were civilians, and probably half of those civilians were killed by misfired rockets. Obviously, we won't know for certain. I was just reading that there was a chap from the Associated Press who went to 2 of the explosion sites in Jabalia, one of which the IDF subsequently, as you mentioned, claimed responsibility for killing 5 children there. But yeah, I mean, the whole situation, is it fair to say it started out with one airstrike on one particularly high-level PIJ leader, and then just escalated from there.
I think it was several airstrikes, wasn't it? Am I imagining it? Or I might have missed an airstrike a couple of days earlier. But on the day when everything kind of very suddenly escalated, I believe was there an airstrike prior to Israel actually like announcing an official operation, or
there was I think the first airstrike was sort of afternoon of the 5th of August, and it was supposed to be one strike on a PIJ leader. I'm just trying to find the name now.
I know there was a series of airstrikes that lasted like a minute and a half or 2 minutes or something like that got given like an official name, right? Or am I making that up? Am I on the wrong
Yeah,
day?
there were two names of the commanders. I think one was Khalid Mansour. The other one was Ahmad Taisiri or something like that. I don't remember the first one, but the first one was the guy who was killed. It was a very sudden attack, and actually on the same morning before the strike, Gantz, Defense Minister Gantz, had a like private meeting, and he was assessing some stuff as it was tweeted by the guys from Times of Israel, including Emmanuel. So apparently it was a very sudden decision and very like a blitz. They just did it.
And it's worth saying as well that prior to the strikes beginning, on the 3rd of August, the head of the sort of Politburo of the PIJ in Gaza is quoted as having said, "We have every right to bomb Israel with our most advanced weapons and make the occupier pay a heavy price. We will not settle for a
I think that was Ziad Nakala,
but we will bomb the centre of the so-called State of Israel." End quote.
Yeah, it was the leader of the Islamic Jihad, Ziad Nakala, but well, it didn't happen. So and also his words about having no truce with Israel lasted for 2 days, and after that, well, I think Egyptians did what they're
Very good at doing.
best at.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember to contextualize the situation that the PIJ pretty much exclusively targeted, civilian targets, unintentionally inside of Gaza and intentionally in Israel. I think it's very important to sort of properly contextualize that, where Israel targeted at least what they believed were proper military targets, whereas the PIJ just, attacked civilian targets.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point, because again, like I said, Israel's actions in Gaza again, have to be scrutinized, and there are absolutely questionable decisions and things bordering on war crimes that have happened in Gaza. But for the most part, like I said, I think the intention is to target military facilities. They're not like some people claim, just go into Gaza and carpet bomb in the place just to deliberately target civilians. And like I said, unlike like the factions inside Gaza, which when another round of fighting kicks off, they just lob hundreds and thousands of unguided rockets towards civilian targets with the hope of killing civilians. What I found quite interesting was this round of fighting was kind of started or escalated due to Israel having intelligence that the Islamic Jihad were planning to target. Aleph, you might know this. I believe it was like they were planning like an anti-tank attack, a missile attack, right, on the border. They were planning to attack like Israeli military vehicles. Is that what the intelligence was about?
I am not sure. I wasn't following that case, but as far as I remember, the Jabari guy, the first guy who was killed, he was the commander of the southern Gaza from the Islamic Jihad, and the other guy, the Khalid Mansour, was the commander of northern Gaza. So basically, I think Israel damaged the power structure in Islamic Jihad, because they have to change the commanders, the deputies. Lots of structure will be changed, and I think that buys Israel some time to keep Islamic Jihad calm, maybe for further operations outside of Gaza or outside of the Mediterranean region.
And the IDF did provide a admittedly incomplete list, but a list nonetheless of some of the targets that they struck. And I've got the list here. Included 45 launch sites, 17 observation posts, 6 munition production facilities, 3 naval targets, 1 attack tunnel, 8 weapons caches, and 8 military camps. So,
yeah,
clearly, as you say, Aleph, they were going for sort of leadership and key infrastructure for the PIJ, things that would ultimately try and prevent further rocket attacks and also reduce their long-term ability to operate.
Yeah, I think if they cripple Islamic Jihad enough, and maybe the only unique power in Gaza, I'm not talking about the small factions like I don't know, Kataib, Abu Ali Mustafa and stuff like that. If Peach fades away from Gaza power-wise and rocket missile-wise, Hamas will be the only power, and I think Hamas is not that military like it was before. It wants to be involved in politics. It wants to get involved in the elections. Despite that, it usually loses, and not losing the elections. I'm talking about the elections getting postponed or cancelled by the PA, by the Palestinian Authority, by the Mahmoud Abbas's side. So I think if Islamic Jihad goes away, maybe for a short time, Hamas could focus on more political matters rather than getting involved in targeting Israel or rocket attacks or small conflicts. Basically, for Hamas that would be even better because it doesn't burn the Qatari monies, so they will focus on more political things and gaining more power and wealth through the peace. An unannounced peace, though. I mean, there is no official peace between Hamas and Israeli side. So that is my humble opinion.
Do you have anything further on Israel Gaza, or should we move on? I mean, I think it'd be good to stick in the Middle East with.
If you're talking about outside of Gaza, yeah, there were some operations against the Shuhada al-Aqsa military wing of the Fatah organization, which is in control of the West Bank, the Palestinian side of the West Bank. And they killed an operative. They killed 2 more. There are still arrests ongoing in Nablus. So I think Israel wants to calm down Gaza and the West Bank simultaneously, but still there are shooting attacks, as there was one 2 nights ago, which was unfortunately against civilians on a bus. But still, I think Israel is just trying to calm the situation inside its territories and near itself down in order to do something else somewhere else. I'm not going to say where is that, or I have a few guesses, but I'm not sure. No one's sure about that. But yeah, for Israeli talks and stuff and the subject, I think we're done here and we're good. But we can talk about Iraq and Iran.
Yeah, I think that probably is a good moment to move on to discussing, as you say, Iraq and Iran. I think myself and Kupshaw briefly touched on Iraq last time, but obviously neither of us being sort of anywhere near experts on that particular nation, we probably didn't have an awful lot of use to say. So perhaps you could just give us an update, Aleph, about what's been going on in Iraq and in Iran over the last couple of weeks.
Sure thing. First thing is that the Muqtada Sadr, the leader of the Sad group and leader of the Saraya Salam military wing of the Sad movement, and his mandates were basically about to evacuate from the Majlis Nawab, aka the Parliament of Iraq, but he wasn't happy because the KDP, the Kurdistani part, led by Barzani, they are not cooperating. So even if they leave, the Parliament, the Majlis Nawab, won't be dissolved. And well, this is the thing that Sadr is trying to push forward. So he's inviting everyone to get involved in a what he calls a widespread round of protests till they achieve what they want. He gave an ultimatum for dissolving the Majlis Nawab, the parliament, but he backed down because Kataib Hezbollah, the Irani-backed side, and Asad al-Haq, and basically most of the Hassan Shabi, the PMU-related groups and militias decided to face it with their own presence. So, like whenever Sadr wants to hold a round of demonstrations, they are also present. They will be also present. So he postponed his round of protests on the next Saturday. I think I think on the 20th of August. Yeah, it was 20th. So possibly there won't be any protests on the 20th of August. But I think his ultimatum is still there, and he wants to dissolve the parliament and go for another round of elections. On the other hand, regarding the Iran, what is happening is that last night Iran announced that we will announce our decision about what people call JCPOA 2, or the next nuclear deal between Iran and Western countries. But according to what the Iran International said, apparently the Western sides, including the United States, are not going to accept the Iran conditions or preconditions. So what they say is that Iran is asking for financial safeguards for the incoming JCPOA, maybe V2. So far it's still a dead end, but no one knows as of now, right now. But apparently there are some further talks, and there will be further talks. In the meantime, Iran is pressurizing the West by supplying drones and UAVs to Russian side. As United States announced, there were military officials of Russia who were in training programs for the UAVs, and well, apparently Iran is about to send maybe first, second batch of UAVs. Some analysts say that there will be Shahed 136, which is very dangerous. Would be very dangerous. They showed that in like a year ago, and well, that might be a game changer for the Russian side if they have proper training programs for the Russians. I think that changed the game for the front lines of Ukraine. Maybe not that much further, but if they get UAVs like the ones that they are in control of Yemeni Houthis, including the one that they call what was that? The 2K thing. I can't recall
yes.
it.
With the loitering munition one.
Yeah. The Qassad 2K one. that one which was used against Saudi Arabia dozens of times. I think that changes the game, and I think this is not a deal for Iran. Some say they want to get Sukhoi in exchange for the drones, but I think this is just
for lack of a better term, I mean it's highly unlikely that they're able to actually receive anything significant from Russia, just because the Russian industrial base has been significantly impacted by sanctions. Speaking about sanctions, though, I think at this point you sort of have to look at the second JCPOA and the sanctions, that Iran would potentially, that would be lifted. And then you look at who Iran is aligning itself with right now. I mean, it's heavily assisting Russia for what seems to be very little physical benefit, mostly just for political gains. And openly flaunting existing sanctions on Russia. You sort of have to go back and you have to look at the JCPOA deal and just, will Iran really negotiate in good faith? Will Iran keep their promises? And that's something that the negotiators really have to look at.
I think they already know that Iran was still working in Fordo even on 2015 when the deal was signed. I'm talking about the first one. And well, Iran didn't keep its promises and wasn't that much obligated to the terms of the JCPOA 1 because, well, it was Fordo, it was the traces of uranium that was found in Turkuzabad, south of Tehran, I guess. I think there's no, this doesn't bring any guarantee to the Western countries, especially, and not especially actually, and Israel, because the most concerned nation in the world who's very, very concerned about the Iranian nuclear and missile capabilities is basically Israel. So, and even though that the former Prime Minister Netanyahu was trying his best, and Israel was trying his best to prevent something like JCPOA 1, well, it happened. I assume that there will be a JCPOA 2 unless United States and Israel, which is not a part of the talks, do something serious about the thing, or they make something very strict and very firm inside the draft and inside the contract to prevent Iran from going further than wherever it is right now. Because we know the enrichment level has grown significantly. Their missile capabilities is growing as well. They have drones, they have UAVs, they have lots of malign activities across the Middle East, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Gaza. So I don't think a JCPOA V2 would stop Iran from doing such stuff.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, I truly think Iran will start to use the Ukraine conflict, and especially Russia, as a place to sort of serve as a testing ground for their equipment in a near-peer war, where they're able to sort of face off against an opponent that, isn't fighting in an asymmetric way, whether that be, in Yemen, where mostly Iranian equipment is used to, penetrate Saudi air defenses, or it isn't really a similar situation as to Ukraine. But, there's a potential we'll continue to see Iran, get this increased both, technological relationship with Russia and this sort of military relation. And I do think there are questions about how close that will be. And, whether or not, say, Iran sends advisors with the drones that they're sending, because, when doing drone operations, it's not exactly like they have to put people on the front lines. And so there's a lot of, a lot of gray area that they can potentially take advantage of.
True, because, well, I think Iran got its first portion of money by getting the latest satellite that was launched by Russia. It was called Khayyam, which was designed and manufactured by Russian companies. So I think there will be an exchange for that because, well, we know the financial situation between Iran and and Russia and the current financial situation in Iran, which is doesn't seem good at all. But I guess this satellite that was launched was something that Russia paid Iran in order to get something in exchange, possibly drones, as many sources are claiming. So I guess it is going on, and it will go on. The EPPUS, the Ilyushin 76T, had a trip to Moscow a few days ago, I guess 3 days ago. It still has, and it goes to Damascus and then go to Moscow or vice versa. So I guess something's going on between Iran, and Iran is moving something, maybe drone parts, UAV parts, or whatever they have at the moment. And I still believe that they are doing this to pressurize the Western part for the negotiations, because Iran doesn't have to use the Ukraine as a test bed for its ground equipment, because if there will be an attack on Iran, it would be something by air, because most of the countries are aware of a ground attack on Iran. Boots on the ground won't end well for them. So I guess they're just testing their UAV power for their proxies, not for themselves, I guess. Because the proxies are closer to their sworn enemy, Israel. So I guess they're just trying the equipment, as you mentioned, for further deployment in the Middle East, not only Iran.
Yeah, and not really to put on my tinfoil hat here, but any potential technological transfer, like you talked about, I think one needs to remember that Russia is still a world leader in ballistic missile and nuclear technology. So
for the moment,
...
Yeah.
True.
I guess. Well, I think we'll see, because it's August and lots of things would happen regarding the Iran talks. No one knows how it's going to end, because the current administration has a very different team than the previous one. The previous one had a very, very basically significant foreign minister, but Mohammad Javad Zarif was actually he studied in the West, he studied in the States. He was a very, very serious diplomat, and he got lots of points that I believe, and maybe many countries, many sides believe that they shouldn't have been given to Iran, including the money, including lots of things. And this current administration doesn't have people like Zarif, which some say it's fortunate for Israel, but we all know that the final decision will be made by the supreme leader of Iran, the Khamenei person, and the governments are just governments. After all, Khamenei decides who is going to be elected, who is going to be removed from the position. I guess even if Khamenei decided for the 2015 JCPOA and now wants to do another round, that's it. And if it doesn't really have to do anything with the government. But still, the negotiation team right now is much weaker than the previous administration, the Rouhani administration.
Yeah, I mean, when you lose your, what can be considered the most moderate figures, which, in Iran, I guess that's not saying much. But when you lose figures like that, obviously the new government is more willing to make these sort of long-term plans that definitely go in a certain direction.
Yeah, I think we have to go back a little bit and talk about the leaked interview, which wasn't supposed to be published, between some interviewer and Javad Zarif, the previous foreign minister of Iran. And interestingly, in that conversation, he mentioned that Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, was trying to stop the JCPOA unless they uh, basically comply with what Russian side wants. So I think I tweeted about it, and the whole audio is available on YouTube. I think through Iran International. But what we know and what most of the Iranians heard about that interview was that Russia was doing quite bad and was behaving very bad against the JCPOA agreement, and apparently it tried its best to stop the JCPOA. I am searching my own tweet. Yeah. This is what I translated through the audio. He said, Zarif says, quote, see, when Russians realized that we are reaching an agreement and passed through all the obstacles, they started to create new obstacles. And their goal wasn't take the enrichment from us. Their goal was to prevent signing the JCPOA, unquote.
Yeah,
This is something
it's important to remember that Lavrov is like comically evil now. And Russian foreign policy basically is just coming down to, making things harder for the West in general, and blowing up a potential JCPOA, and making relations in the Gulf region more tense is obviously a win for Russia, because it distracts from what they intended to do at the time, which was invade Ukraine.
True.
Yeah, but regarding the JCPOA, I think I'm not sure has Russia changed since then, but we know that Sergei Lavrov didn't change, and I think he won't change as long as the Putin is there. So, but for the previous round, for the 2015 round, apparently Russia was very firm against the JCPOA, but after all, the agreement was reached and it was signed, but well, it didn't last long. I'm not sure about the current round, but I'm pretty sure Russia wants to take something like a big piece of cake away from this agreement if it wants to get involved in this agreement.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I at this point, I think Russia is an anti-party to the JCPOA. They actively don't want to see it. They don't want, as I said before, they don't want stabilization in the Gulf region, because it distracts the U.S. And if the U.S. has to devote resources to the Gulf region for either policing or if things turn hot, that's obviously distracting from the situation in Ukraine.
I had an idea that maybe Russia is even trying to maybe get away or at least lift some of its sanctions by pressurizing the agreements for the second JCPOA. So maybe they want something in exchange, like lifting some sanctions from some specific Russian individuals and entities, and then just sign the next deal. But still, I'm not sure about the European side. I think right now they are more hostile to Russia in comparison to 2015, because, well, we know Ukraine. So I guess Russia would try its best to get something big from the whole thing. But well, so far we don't know what's going on. During the talks, maybe we get an update in a few hours or up to a few days, but we'll see what's going on. And I think Iran, even if Iran agrees with this deal and signs this deal, I don't think they will be very much, they won't comply with the agreements. I think they won't stop Fordo, the nuclear facility in Fordo. I think they won't stop some specific sites that are still under the International Atomic Agency observation. They restricted the access to cameras. I don't think Iran would stop this big ship that started sailing failing, at least for now.
Yeah. And I think at this point we should probably just pivot over to Ukraine to finish out the episode. But I guess the last 2 weeks have been slightly busy in southern Ukraine. I think we can say that.
You mean like real southern, like Crimea?
Yeah, well, Crimea, Kherson Oblast, all
Yeah.
that southern front area.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially Crimea in the last. I mean, even just like the last week. I can't remember when the attack on the airbase was.
Well, that was, I think. Let me double check. I think almost a week ago now,
Was it a week?
from when we're recording the podcast.
Yeah, so I was just looking. So it was 7 days ago. I can't even remember where it was near. It was on the west coast.
Nova
Right?
Fedorovka / Saki Air Base.
Saki,
It's the
that's
main
the one.
Russian naval aviation base in the area. Was taken from, or sort of taken for, the sort of Crimea situation before 2014 was weird, but it was basically captured from Ukraine then. And we saw Russian naval aviation sort of continue to operate out of there. The attack was particularly devastating to the existing units at the airbase. I think, what was it, like almost half of the available combat power of the available units there was destroyed.
Was it 14 aircraft? Was that the last count?
I
Was it
don't
even
know.
more?
I think we'd seen 8 confirmed, burnt out, destroyed.
Yeah, oh yeah, like 8 like obliterated, but yeah, like damaged beyond repair. Probably again another good amount. And there still seems to be some dispute over what the attack actually was. I mean, of course, the official Ukrainian claim, which is quite frustrating, just being kind of like uncritically parroted by the media, it seems, is that it was a special forces raid into the base and sabotage, which just looking at the satellite imagery just seems, and the size of the explosions seems very, very unlikely. And just to jump forward and jump back, again with the attack this morning against an ammunition depot a little bit further north, Ukraine have made the same claim again, that it was a special forces raid and sabotage. It just seems to me that they're claiming this just to keep Russia looking over their shoulders a little bit in Crimea, looking for some kind of phantom special forces unit that's running around blowing the ammunition depots up that probably doesn't exist. And the real explanation is probably a lot simpler, in that the Ukraine have access to some weapons that haven't been officially announced, that have the range to hit these kind of targets that they didn't previously have. But technically, it sounded like you were going to say something then in regards to that.
Yeah, it is worth us noting, in all fairness, that the source of these explosions, whether it be a missile attack or special forces, has rather split the Osint community. I think it's fair to say there are.
Oh, okay. No,
a lot
sorry.
of
It
people
hasn't
who
split.
say it's.
There
Well,
is.
no, I'm not saying that there's arguments necessarily, but there are certainly those who hold the opinion that it's some sort of missile strike, and there are those who argue that it is possibly a special forces operation, as the Ukrainians are claiming. Obviously, we may never actually know the truth, because it's likely to be kept very much under wraps until probably 30, 40, 50 years down the line, unless there's a drastic change of circumstances. But we'll be very, very clear that we cannot say categorically whether or not it was special forces or whether or not it was a missile.
No, there is currently a debate going on right now, or not even a debate per se, but everyone has their own ideas of whether or not it was, a missile attack, a drone attack, potentially an attack by special forces using loitering munitions, or a more direct special forces attack. Yeah, I would say there's general conversation in the community about that.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the biggest thing pointing towards it not being some kind of special forces raid is the fact that Ukraine are claiming that's what it was less than a week after the first attack and hours after the second attack. I mean, it just seems monumentally stupid to, confirm that as, for the most part, those guys would, if it was especially, they'd probably still be in Crimea, and it makes no sense whatsoever to, give Russia any more ammunition to kind of look for saboteurs inside, behind their own lines, if that was the genuine cause of these attacks. So I think that for me is why I'm leaning towards some kind of new weapon that hasn't been announced, is because it's the opposite of what the claim is at the moment, whilst, these operations are still ongoing. After the first attack a week ago, they said this is just the beginning, there's going to be more attacks and like more things to come, which, as we saw today, this morning, another, attack at the ammunition depot.
Well, the attack on the ammunition depot was just absolutely, I'll just say beautifully executed. Beautifully planned and executed, managing to both hit a major electrical substation serving the train network and hitting an ammunition depot that just happened to be at the crossroads of basically every single train line in Crimea, including the major artery heading into Ukraine. So that was definitely a significantly damaging event to Russian transport capabilities in the region.
Yeah, no, exactly. And as I said, like it seems like the damage to the rail line wasn't as significant as some people kind of initially thought. And like it seemed, after the attack this morning, passenger trains were stopped coming from Russia, towards the north of Crimea, due to damage to the line. But only a few hours later, they claimed that the damage had been repaired. I think that's where the risk is for Russia. If Ukraine do strike and damage that line in any kind of real significant way, there's just no way for them to kind of transport any kind of large quantities of ammunition to the southern front from Russia, and obviously that's going to have like a huge impact on what we've been saying for months now, the upcoming battle for Kherson, which still hasn't materialized, but it seems to be, with the moves Ukraine are making, kind of edging closer and closer. The targeting of bridges around the city. Obviously now we've got the targeting of obviously what would be a critical airbase for the defense of the city in Crimea, and obviously the ammunition depots as well, which would have been, again, like for resupplying the Russian forces in the southern front. So it seems like an offensive is imminent, in quotation marks, as I've been saying for a few months now. But it seems to me that the Ukraine are definitely building to it, if not necessarily pulling the trigger just yet. But I think that's where the next kind of phase of this war is going to be kind of focused. The Russian advance around Luhansk is largely stalled. They seem to be having very, very minor successes here and there, like making tens of meters of ground rather than kilometers and tens of kilometers as they previously were. So it makes sense that like the offensive on Kiev was abandoned. It seems like they might kind of put a hold on the Donbass offensive for a while, and kind of as we've seen, it started shifting a lot of troops to the south to repel what's expected to be quite a large Ukrainian offensive. But at the moment that hasn't happened. But I don't know what your guys' takes are. If you have anything else to add.
I mean, I think in Kherson Oblast, at least, it's more of a steady wearing down of existing Russian defenses in the area.
Mm-hmm.
I think the aim is to cut off Kherson or make it untenable for Russian forces to remain there, which, they're effectively trying to turn the Antonovsky Bridge into dust, and making pretty good progress on it. It appears that Russian air defense systems are having a mighty difficult time intercepting HIMARS missiles. I think the last attack they potentially intercepted 2 or 3 out of the total strike.
Yeah, there
But
was
yeah,
there
that
was
was
missiles launched and there were kind of explosions in the sky. There was potential interceptions, but
yeah,
there was still
and
a
that was
hell
with
of a lot of impacts on the bridge.
Yeah, that was with multiple air defense systems trying to defend the bridge, and so it may continue to be harder and harder and harder for Russian forces to actually remain in Kherson, the city of Kherson, not the region itself. They may have to retreat at some point south of the Dnieper river, which again would be a major victory for the Ukrainians. Kherson is or still remains a major objective for the Russian forces to hold on to and to attempt to convert over to this, basically trying to get the population to become Russian. And then in the east, I know that there were some reports. I had reported on it. There was a story from a Russian soldier basically explaining that Ukrainian artillery had become extremely dangerous to Russian advances, where Ukrainians were able to call fire in on Russian forces and Russian artillery within, minutes at most, and the Ukrainians were properly using, various intelligence resources, whether or not that be from the Americans or through smaller drone-related means to target Russian forces. So we really haven't seen much Russian progress in the east now for weeks. Just generally indicating that the Russians are just running into that trouble.
Oh, exactly. I don't think there's been a lot more in Ukraine other than the attacks in Crimea. Haven't been a huge. Like I said, there's been a stalemate, I guess, in the Donbass. Anything else? Anything else you want to touch on what's happened since the last episode? Again, I wasn't here. I wasn't sure what you talked about.
Oh man, I don't think there's anything I'm seeing. I think we covered everything. Middle East, I think we've hit on the main Ukrainian points.
Just mention the first anniversary of Afghan withdrawal, or do we want to
go? Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I know we've talked about Afghanistan a lot.
Also,
I
Turkey
think,
killed 22 Syrian soldiers a couple of hours ago. That might be worth a mention.
I mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, it's been mentioned now.
I mean, that's still all around the, again, imminent Turkish intervention in northern Syria that they've been threatening for the last few months.
Yeah,
against the SDF.
The invasion that's going to happen, any week for the past 6 months.
Yeah, but it seems things have escalated a little bit in the last couple of days. They've accused the SDF of firing into Turkey, so there's been some kind of cross-border shelling, which as we saw from Ukraine, when those kind of accusations started getting thrown around, the actual invasion wasn't far off. Not to say that's going to happen, but you have to think that it's definitely going to happen soon, especially with such quite a large attack against that Syrian government position, joint Syrian government SDF position, which I initially thought the 22 killed was just kind of rebel source hopefulness, exaggeration, but it's now been confirmed, it seems, by government sources to various people on social media. So that could be worth keeping an eye on. Do you want to wrap up by just touching on Afghanistan then?
Yeah, I suppose we can. We'll probably best bring it to a close. So, obviously, at the time of recording, we are pretty much a year on now from what the UK called Operation Pitting, or what I think most of us dubbed the Kabul airlift, which was obviously the arguably the shambles of the sort of withdrawal and collapse of Afghanistan in the face of Taliban forces. It's fair to say that sort of we've continued over the last 12 months to see the news stories we were expecting to be coming out of Afghanistan, sort of the removal of women's rights in large parts, and obviously education taking a massive hit as well. It's fair to say that the Taliban hasn't really made perhaps as much of a fuss about its victory as we perhaps would have thought. But I've been reminded in the last few days, particularly of the tragic deaths of 13 US Marines and 170 odd Afghan civilians in the blast outside Kabul airport, which again we're very close to the first anniversary of that attack. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that topic as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like the whole thing in general was just. I think did you say shambles? Is that the word you used? And I think that is just the best. The best. I saw on Twitter earlier. I seen some photos of the US C-17 that were people trying to were clinging onto the outside of. And when it landed, it had like handprints on the dust on the outside of it, which is just absolutely horrific. And like you said, like exactly what we all kind of expected after the Taliban takeover has largely transpired. I think there was a protest, women protesting for rights there in the last couple of weeks that was unsurprisingly quite put down quite violently. One thing I have noticed seems to have slowed down, though, or maybe it's just not been reported as much, is it seems that like the kind of ISIS attacks against Taliban have kind of sort of especially in the weeks and first kind of few months after the US withdrawal, there was quite a large number of attacks against kind of high-ranking Taliban targets. And those seem to have kind of stopped. The reason for that, obviously, I don't really want to speculate on. I don't know if there was like an agreement's been made, or if the Taliban have, maybe they've been successful in kind of rooting them out, because there was definitely some large operations they did try to conduct against like ISIS cells, especially around Kabul. But yeah, it seems like, again, there's been no real surprises, has there, since the Taliban takeover. I mean, the reduction of human rights, just freedom of the press. I believe, I can't remember, I forget her name now, but there was a Western journalist who I thought it was weird at the time, but I didn't really clock that it was. I didn't really know them, so I didn't think it was particularly weird. But they posted a tweet that was something like it was like an apology tweet for lies they posted about Taliban or something along those lines, which I thought was quite unusual. And then a couple of days later, they kind of followed up saying that they'd been forced to post that tweet, like under duress, like in prison in Kabul. I think she'd been investigating again. I think like like Taliban crimes against. I think it was against women. But yeah, she said she'd been like kind of locked up and been to like write and tweet that and tweet this out and then delete it and retweet it and delete it and retweet it, until they were happy with the wording, until she was finally let go and allowed to leave the country, in which is then she then revealed exactly what was going on. But yeah, again, it's like I said, it's exactly what we expected, which is sad, but it's difficult to see like how any change or any kind of improvement can be made, especially when the Taliban are in charge.
Yeah. And I think, as we probably alluded to in the episode, the Afghan special back in season 1, we at this point, Afghan is, to all intents and purposes, really a lost cause, probably, because there is not going to be political will, certainly anytime soon, for Western troops to go back into Afghanistan to get rid of the Taliban again. Ultimately, that's never going to happen. And unfortunately, at the minute, what we're seeing, particularly in the UK, is that the British government has now become so involved in, obviously, the crisis in Ukraine and trying to support, Ukrainian refugees, that to all intents and purposes, Afghan refugees and those Afghans who supported British forces and allied forces in Afghanistan, who unfortunately didn't make it out in the Kabul airlift, seem to have more or less disappeared or have been forgotten about.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as I think I said at the time in that episode back in season 1, it all comes down to the decision that Western governments made that they were no longer prepared to be in Afghanistan. Ultimately, I do firmly believe they left Afghanistan to its current fate.
Absolutely.
And I don't think the history books will look particularly favourably on that decision.
No, and so they shouldn't. I think the state Afghanistan's in now is 100%, maybe not 100%, but I think 90% the fault or the decisions that were made in, to be honest, like the last weeks and months prior to that kind of shambles of an evacuation. If they'd started, if those decisions had been made 6 months to a year earlier, I don't think we'll be in a situation we're in now. If the Afghan government were, military, and obviously I know there's a lot of money spent in training and supplying the Afghan military, but when you compare it to like the support and equipment that Ukraine have been given, it's difficult to, would it have made a difference? It's unlikely. It seems, there's obviously a kind of an internal civil war is very much different than equipping a country to fight against an external aggressor, isn't it? They're not really comparable, but more could have been done at the end, I think, to support the Afghan government, if not just kind of hanging around for a few more months and at least trying to degrade the Taliban to a point where they were no longer a threat to Kabul, at least for the time being. Literally legging it as they were, taken region by region, without a shot fired in some cases. It definitely didn't look good. And like I said, definitely I don't think will be looked upon fondly in the history books.
And with that note, I think we will call it a day with this episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. This has been the Osint Bunker Podcast, Season 4, Episode 5. We'll be back in about 2 weeks' time with another episode and another guest. Thank you very much for listening.